Yo, welcome to me rambling about timeline shit that I only have minimal amount of research, but I play the games a lot and I watch a lot of videos, so I'm just gonna give you my opinion on things. As I just said, I haven't gone through and like super went down wikis and other things and like pinpointed every little thing, but I have watched a lot of videos that have done that, and I play the games, and I have my own opinions. And I am going to share said opinion about the Tears of the Kingdom timeline placement. Even though, yes, I know the creators when working on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom didn't think about timeline placements as much because they're basically a soft reboot, and they encouraged talk about it, but they didn't really think about it as much as these games, which. By the way, yes, they did think about timeline placements. I just watched a video talking about how they did care about the timeline placements. Each of these games do talk about timeline placement, and events are different depending on what game happened before, and like even the Ganondorfs between Twilight Princess and Wind Waker are two different Ganondorfs because they're in the two different parts of the timeline. So they definitely had thought between connecting these games. That was the whole advertisement of Skyward Sword. That one was like, this is the first in the timeline. This explains why all this shit happens. So take that as you will. But Nintendo, if you ever listen to anybody, listen to all the Zelda fans who say, hey, please care about the timeline. It's very important to us. Having to be a puzzle for us is fine, but you should have an answer and you should be able to connect it, because that's why a lot of Zelda fans are Zelda fans. But let's talk about things. So we know definitively that whatever happens with the timeline, that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is at the end. Anything that happens here, it's at the end. Now, what timeline is it? I have two answers. I'm going to talk about the one that is mostly talked about, I feel like. And then I'm going to give my answer on if it's going to be whatever specific one. So the answer that people talk to and go straight towards is the conversion timeline, where all three timelines, the downfall timeline, the child timeline, and the adult timeline, they all converge into one to make like a joint timeline, making it linear yet again after the events of Ocarina of Time, which is the most important game in the entire franchise because it leads to a lot of different things. And it really is, story-wise and just popularity-wise, the biggest game in the franchise. So the idea is that it is at the end of all three timelines, somehow. Now, that is a very easy answer, because it's so far ahead in the future that the stories of these three could be melded to one, because they are times of legend. But to me, in order for it to actually work, for a timeline conversion, which would make it, if you made it like nice lines, would make it look like a rupee. Just gonna point that out, like 3 timelines, and then if you make them all converge, it'll look like a rupee if you drew it out. The only thing for me, that there would have to be an event. There would have to be a timeline converging event. A event that would actually merge the timelines into making it into a hodgepodge of all three, which somebody has explained how that can work, on how conversion timelines can work, and how other series have done it. I remember watching a video about it a while ago, but for me, there has to be an actual event. And so it has to be like original Hyrule Warriors. Now, that game is not canon, so I'm not saying that is the event, but this is a very loose theory of a converging until we get explanation on an event time thing like that, where something happens, something Ganondorf or a reincarnation of Vadi or another original villain somehow trying to resurrect Ganon's fucked up somewhere and accidentally converged timelines, started opening portals, and then essentially a big Bane event happened, but instead of erasing the timelines, they converge into one. And so everything is true and not true at the same time. There would have to be some sort of crazy event like that for this type of theory of converging timelines to work. So until we get an explanation that's like that, this theory is, while a fun theory and a theory that I can definitely get behind, is kind of a give me. Like, they just converged. But if we're going to try to put it into a solid spot, for me, and the kind of the reason why I'm sitting in this position, is because I believe that it should be in the downfall timeline. And there is a couple reasons for that. And this really made me think after watching a creator's video on how the landmasses work between games, and how we talk about timelines and where certain parts of Hyrule are within that fit in the map of Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom. And a lot of what the downfall timeline is in Old Hyrule, an area that is like Hyrule, but kind of in a smaller, different area that is still within the major part of Hyrule, but it has been degraded over time because of Ganondorf's power. And even though the hero prevails, it was ultimately too late. By the time we get to the original Zelda, within the timeline, the original Zelda and Zelda 2, Hyrule is a husk of its former self. Link between all these games tried really pushing back against Ganon. And even though eventually Link from Adventure of Link was able to stop him from resurrecting that final time, it was already too late here. And this, I believe, is how we got two different imprisoning wars. We know that the imprisoning war happened right before A Link to the Past. We know a version of the imprisoning war happened, and how Ganondorf, or Ganon, got locked away, because the imprisoning war had to have happened in the downfall timeline, because Link was successful in Ocarina of Time. He was successful in these two timelines. So him being successful, there didn't have to be a war, because Link was able to defeat Ganon. He was able to defeat Ganondorf, who turned into Ganon. And because of the sealing, that's why you have him in his Ganondorf state in Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, because the power was vanquished and held back, instead of him turning into Ganon and having him keep that power throughout all of this. Now, that might have been a slight retroactive thing that Nintendo have done, but not that far off. But it makes sense. Because Link failed, there was the imprisoning war that then made all these events happen. Now, because of the degradation of Hyrule, I believe that because Hyrule was getting weaker and weaker, even after pushing back Ganon so far, that I like to believe that the story that was told in the beginning of Breath of the Wild of 10,000 years ago was this Link. Now, it was exaggerated and played with because of 10,000 years of storytelling. Like, have you ever played the game Telephone? You can't even tell the same straight story within 12 to 20 people. You think, generations of people over 10,000 years, even if it's carved into stone literally, is not gonna have the story twisted a bit. It could have and languages change within 10,000 years. That it could have happened where them calling Ganon Calamity Ganon is a result of calling him a calamity because of what happened within here. Now, I don't have solid facts for that, but to me, it makes sense. So again, after the degradation that happened in this part of the timeline, all the way up to Adventure of Link, him staying sealed took away his power. He reverted back to Ganondorf, right? Or in turn, he got resurrected again as a Gerudo. After the Gerudo come back, after years of not being really part of the series because of events that happened here, they were able to survive and come back, and their old traditions were able to come back. So even though he was sealed, the Gerudo were able to evolutionarily come back in the way that they used to be, with their genes being so powerful that only a male is only born every 100 years. And that is when Ganondorf took his opportunity to come back and essentially restart the cycle. So we have the original Prisoning War here, that all the links here tried to keep it going. Like, tried to keep Ganondorf, or Ganon, down. Then at the end of the timeline here, after years have passed, Hyrule has been... There is an old Hyrule, and Hyrule has been totally ruined and slowly trying to build up. This is when the Zonai come into play. The Zonai find Hyrule, and here is a new creation of Hyrule. The Hyrule that we see in Breath of the Wild is in the same area, but it's a second founding of Hyrule. And they will call it Hyrule because, one, tradition, and what they found in the land. They're like, oh, we know that this area was called this, so we're gonna keep it going. And another reason why the Triforce might not be around, because of whatever events take place after Adventure of Link, the Triforce not being needed or being tucked away in a certain way. So we get a new founding of Hyrule because this Hyrule is no more because of the events that take place. We get a new Ganondorf because of not only the curse being recycled from Demise from way up there, but the Gerudo coming back into play and going back with the old traditions without realizing that Ganon used to be a Gerudo. Because after generations, and especially when your people only come back, after generations of him being a pig monster that tried ruling the world, they would not know that he was originally a Gerudo. So, them not realizing that would not be able to put in the systems in place to have a new Ganondorf be able to come up. So them not realizing that, and then having their tradition of, genetically a male is born every 100 years, and now that male is king, and that king happens to be a new Ganondorf. And then the second imprisoning war happens, because he had to get imprisoned yet again, and all that malice that happened, that got cultivated, made Calamity Ganon. Because Ganon will always revert back to his pig form, because that's based off the curses, the Demise curse. That's his animalistic version of himself is that pig Ganon form. So it makes the most amount of sense, and I'm sure somebody else has made this video and even explained it better than me, but I just want to spit my opinions out there. It makes the absolute most amount of sense for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to be in the Downfall timeline. A recreation of Hyrule, a new imprisoning war, and a new Ganondorf happening because of the degradation of Hyrule that led up to that point. Because Hyrule is well and alive in these two, either in a new Hyrule or just within itself, that Hyrule is just still there because they were able to defeat Ganon. And even though Wind Waker, Hyrule was flooded, and they found new Hyrule in an adult timeline, there isn't a whole lot to go off of when you talk about that timeline and how Hyrule was found anew by the Zonai instead of another Link. It only makes sense once the curse is screwed with, degradation happens, new people find that land and reclaim it as their own. And then the cycle starts anew. It makes the most amount of sense for it to be within this timeline. And there you go. That's me spouting my opinion on the timeline placement of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So I'm open for discussion down below. And again, Nintendo, I just want you to know we care about the timeline. Don't throw the timeline aside. But you have to know so many theory videos are online talking about this stuff. And I just want Nintendo to know that, I know, as if they're ever actually going to watch this fucking video, I want Nintendo to know the community cares about the timeline. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more from me, subscribe, and even more if you go down to the links down below. And until next time, bye.